All right, we're back. So just to give you a little bit of a background first, we'll just summarize this reading a little bit just to help you kind of catch everything that's there, the main points that are there. But again, just to give you a little background first, we hear about the prophets of Baal and Asherah. Baal and Asherah were the names of two of the most prominent false gods or idols that were worshipped by many of the Israelites for a number of centuries. They were false gods that originated in the nations around Israel, and unfortunately, many of the Israelites began to worship them as well. And in most of the cases, it was in part because they were led by their own kings, kings who were supposed to lead people to the true God, and yet these wicked kings that reigned in Israel after David and Solomon, many of them led the Israelites into idolatry. Not all of them. There were a few good kings here and there, a few good kings that worshiped the true God. But kings like Ahab, who we hear about in this account, he was definitely one of the most wicked kings in Israel, and definitely was a promoter of those false gods, Baal and Asherah. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a background, I guess you could say, a little bit of context for this account that we hear about. We heard about Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of the true God, one of the most famous prophets of the true God in the Old Testament times. And so basically what happens here is that Elijah sent for King Ahab and said he wanted to have basically a face-off, you could say, between himself and the prophets of Baal and Asherah. So the two different camps, Elijah, who worshiped the true God, and then the others who worshiped these false gods, they were both supposed to build an altar. They went up to a mountain called Mount Carmel to do this. So Elijah built an altar to the true God. The prophets of Baal and Asherah built an altar to their false gods. And what they were supposed to do then was simply pray to their gods, and whichever god answered with fire, in other words, burned up the offering that was on the altar that they built, that would be the proof that that was the true God. So we heard about how, the prophets of Baal and Asherah, they built their altar. There were almost 1,000 of them there between the two. 450 prophets of Asherah, I think, and 400 prophets of Baal, if I remember right. And they were dancing around, they were praying, and Baal wasn't doing anything. Asherah wasn't doing anything because, well, they're false gods. And so Elijah even kind of started poking fun at them, as you read. So then finally it came time for Elijah to pray to the true God, to take his turn. And just to prove a point, just to prove how powerful the true God was, Elijah even had them douse his entire sacrifice and altar with all sorts of water, because obviously water does not burn, and the fact that this would be burned up with fire makes it all the more incredible. And so Elijah prayed to God, and instantly God burned up the sacrifice and the altar and everything surrounding it, including the rocks itself, it mentions. And so this clearly showed the people that were there who the true God was. And this did, in fact, change the hearts of many people and brought many people back to the Lord, at least temporarily. Because, it clearly showed that the God of the Bible, whom Elijah represented, that was the true God, not Baal, not Asherah, not any other false god for that matter. So that's the basic gist of what we just read from 1 Kings chapter 18. I'm just going to read the 2 bullet points real quickly here for you. And then I don't know how you want to do the questions. Maybe what you want to do is just pause it real quick after I read the bullet points, and then you can try to work through the questions on your own, and then hit play again and listen to me answer them. I'm just going to keep going on, and I'll read the question, and I'll give you the answer for it. Maybe I'll say a couple extra words in connection with it. So like I said, you can handle that how you want. If you want to just listen through and then go through and write down your answers after that too, that's fine. So anyway, the bullet points just say Ahab was a horrendous king who ruled the northern kingdom of Israel. And it says through Elijah, God proved that he was the one true God, and the people, at least temporarily, rallied to him. All right. So question number 1 says, according to Elijah, how had King Ahab been making trouble for the people of Israel? And basically how he had been doing that was he had led the people into false worship. He had led them not to worship the true God, but to worship the false gods like Baal and Asherah. Question number 2 says, Whom did Elijah ask King Ahab to gather together on Mount Carmel? And the answer for that one is, he wanted the people of Israel to gather there, and particularly the prophets of Baal and Asherah, because again, this was supposed to be really a standoff between the prophets of the false gods and Elijah, the prophet of the true God, to show who the true God was. So again, the people that Elijah wanted to gather there were particularly the prophets of Baal and Asherah, but also other Israelites as well, so that they could be there to see what was going on and to see God give the victory to Elijah. Question number 3 says, what contest did Elijah propose in verses 22 to 24 to prove who the real God was? And again, it had to do with this, building altars and seeing which God answered by fire. Was it going to be the God that Elijah proclaimed, or was it going to be the false God, the God Baal? Number 4, how did things go for the prophets of Baal? Well, nothing happened, right? Because Baal is a false god. He's just, ultimately, any false god is just a figment of somebody's imagination. And so he couldn't do anything because he doesn't really exist other than in their own imagination. So Baal did not answer, no matter, or even though things had been going on for quite a while. Number 5, what was the first thing Elijah did after he called the people to come near him? And that was that he repaired God's altar. Oop, I see I'm running out of memory space here, so I'm going to have to pause this quick.